But yeah, you may have seen all of the violence last week. Frances Widdowson attended to talk about residential schools, and she was arrested for trespassing. There was other violence or assault that went on. Property was destroyed. I believe a camera was smashed, along with a number of other things.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, excellent.
So I thought we'd just get started by, well, I thought we would just chat for a little bit and then start to bring other people into the conversation. But maybe start us off. I have to work out some tech issues on my end. So maybe just start us off by, instead of going into what happened the day of, maybe kind of since then, what's gone on and kind of a summary. But this has been an ongoing trend of there being more sort of backlash to people who question the residential school narrative. So maybe, is this the next biggest escalation? Where are we at on this file here? And kind of what's been the response since this Uvic event?
So there's been two major upheavals. One at the University of Winnipeg,
where there is 3.5 hours of the meltdown that happened there on September 26th, where a whole bunch of gangsters were brought by these female cry bullies and used as a way of attacking people who would try to fight back against these women who were assaulting me and putting a drink over my head. So that was one that's being pursued by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. We're trying to get freedom of information requests from the university, which I believe are due on December 22nd, to see what craziness was going on behind the scenes. And then they gave me a trespass notice at University of Winnipeg, which we just told them we were not going to leave. I got a trespass notice at Thompson Rivers University, and we told them we were not going to leave, and they just stood back and watched while we had a great event there and talked to a whole bunch of people. And then obviously Uvic was watching this and thought, well, we can't have this kind of discussion occur about whether or not remains have been found at Kamloops. So they decided to bring in the police to arrest me. And that is now being contested as well by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I am going into the University of British Columbia on January 22nd to see what that university, you try to discuss whether or not the remains of 215 children have been confirmed at the Kamloops Indian Residential School.
That's fantastic. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about the Society for Academic Freedom and a little bit about, because not many people have heard of it, I don't. So maybe you could tell us real quick, for those who don't know about the Society for Academic Freedom, what they do, and specifically what, like you said, you were, that they're going to be like, speaking up, and like, are they sending an open letter, or sort of like what sort of activist action does that look like from the Society for Academic Freedom?
Well, that organization, which has been developed specifically to try to protect academic freedom in Canada, I'm a board member for that organization. I believe they are going to be sending a premier of British Columbia, copied to the board of directors or board of governors of University of Victoria, the president, and so on. But the major player in these things that are happening is the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, which is an organization that is funded by the public. It's done by donations, and they pursue legal challenges and freedoms. So that's what I was referring to. But they have been pursuing a number of cases on my behalf against universities. The biggest one being the University of Lethbridge. That's going to court in 2026. So the argument is that by removing me from campus or trying to stop me from speaking on university campuses, this is a violation of freedom of expression in the charter, and they take cases to court.
about this. And of course, it's very, very expensive to try to mount a case of this kind, and takes a lot of expertise. And so Glenn Blackett is the lawyer who's been helping me to try to hold these universities to account.
All right, I'm trying to switch microphone. Can you hear me on this microphone or no?
Yes, I can.
Okay, what about now? Nope, nope. That's super annoying. Okay, so, well, that's fantastic. Let's go over kind of what you saw. Give us a scene. We saw some of the clips. You showed up with the sign that said,
Yep.
what did it say? Denial or truth, which was a
And on the front it says, what remains. Kathy Drake, who's on this call, was kind enough to have these printed for me. Will Dove was the designer of these. It's a sandwich board, basically. I call it billboards just because Billboard Chris calls it billboards, but it's a sandwich board. It has on the front what remains, and then it has the logo of the graphic for 215 Every Child Matters, which of course is the kind of the thing that's used for the Kamloops Senior Residential School claim. And then on the back it says denial or truth, and it has a picture of Dallas Brody from 1BC, who is holding up a sign saying 0 bodies in front of the Penticton Indian Band's billboard, which says 215 with 2 handprints and 2 footprints and the Every Child Matters logo. And this, of course, was put up to claim that 215 children, the remains of 215 children, have been found at the Kamloops Senior Residential School, which is a completely false claim and is highly unlikely to be true. And Dallas Brody was holding up this sign, 0 bodies, to draw attention to this false claim. And because of that, she has been smeared as a residential school denialist, which is equating her comments.
Wow. You know, I've noticed that with this whole, you know, we've seen this. I relate this sort of, you know, I broadly would call it like left-wing hysteria on certain topics. And it's very interesting because you have maybe like the transgenderism stuff where they will have a very sort of radical moral argument. Some may call it emotional blackmail, where they'll say, well, if you don't agree with me, Francis, I'm going to kill myself. And a lot of different trans people will kill ourselves. And I'm looking at the sort of response to you questioning this narrative and others. And the response is usually like, you know, it's like, well, that's, you know, that just really hurts my feelings. And it's not to be insensitive or anything, but I guess I don't think that this residential school denialism, like hysteria and like this kind of like moral condemnation, it like really doesn't pack the same punch as some of the other more established ones. Like, for example, Holocaust denialism, like you will get very condemned for that. But they're really trying to build it, right? They're trying to build the stronger blackmail, emotional blackmail argument. They're trying to build it up to try and, you know, vilify people like yourself for stating historical facts. But yourself and others have been doing a lot of damage. And I guess, you know, what do you think for any naysayers who maybe are listening in, for any haters, is there anything that you want to kind of clarify when it comes to your stance, like in a nutshell? Because, you know, some people who are kind of maybe just driving by this stream who think you're some deplorable monster. I know you have entire lectures on it. In many respects, you could be considered an expert on, you know, indigenous policy. Did you not work for the government on indigenous policy at some point? But yeah, maybe speak to that of kind of like your stance in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I would consider myself, well, the main expert, of course, is Nina Green, the incredible researcher who has helped a whole bunch of people, like, you know, me included, to get the facts about this case. but I would consider myself to be one of the main experts on the Kamloops Indian Residential School. I've been studying Aboriginal policy for 30 years. I was a policy analyst with the government of the Northwest Territories for 5, where I was involved with implementing the government's what was called the traditional knowledge policy for that government. So and certainly I think that people, I enter into a lot of controversial areas, so certainly I can be wrong on a number of matters, but I don't really get a lot of people arguing with me on my stance. They, like people like Sean Carlton from the University of Manitoba and Negon Sinclair from the University of Manitoba, they just say that talking to me shouldn't occur because to do that would be like
Sean
denying
Carlton
gravity. Like that's how
Negon Sinclair from the University of Manitoba. They just say that talking to me shouldn't occur because to do that would be like denying gravity. Like that's how ridiculous and off the wall my arguments are, when I'm really my main claim now, which I just want to talk about constantly because I think it's very important, is whether the remains of 215 children have been found or confirmed. I see this as a matter of fact, we need to have truth on this claim. Program on my visit to Winnipeg is he confuses the idea that children died at residential schools, which everyone agrees with. The children did die at the residential schools. At Kamloops, we have it's between 49 and 82 children deaths that are recorded. Only 2 of them confirmed at the school, and those children died of, one, an accidental hanging of a child playing a game called Outlaw. The other one was a girl who died when she drowned in the Thompson River. So everyone accepts that, but he brings this up as some kind of refutation for the claim that there were 215 clandestine burials at Kamloops. So this is the key. And also, he's now bringing up that there's some kind of historical records that show that there's 215 children buried in the apple orchard. These are 2 very, very separate things. The clandestine burial issue, and then the question of, how many children died at the residential schools? What did they die of? Where are they buried? And what happens often is that you have cemeteries that exist that used to have wooden markers marking the graves, and those markers have deteriorated. So now you just have basically an unkempt cemetery, or even a field that is not even clear it's a cemetery anymore. That is just, no one should be surprised to find remains in a cemetery. And there are some Aboriginal people who want to know exactly where their relatives are buried in forgotten cemeteries. But this is kind of the confusion that we see with respect to this issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we should talk about people, like, when on one hand we have you coming onto campus wanting to have a conversation about this, and on the other hand we have someone committing violence and sort of getting away with it because they're on the right side of the issue, because they're part Indigenous, and because they disagree with you and their feelings are hurt, they're allowed to just kind of righteously say, yes, I'm going to commit violence because I disagree with you. You could call that political violence. They're being violent for political reasons or contending historical facts. And they seem to get away with it. And this is a pattern I've seen on other files and other issues, like the transgender file. You'll see people protesting against transgenderism in schools. and they will get beat up by Antifa, and the cops will watch it happen. And then they'll sometimes end up arresting the person who got beat up. But maybe if we could just focus on this case, I think there's a particular individual who won a Juno who is kind of roughing some people up and not really facing many consequences. The only consequence being what? Getting interviews on TV as some hero? Am I getting this right?
Yeah, this is Logan's dad.
Who is a musician. He just got arrested actually to do with some kind of protest he was involved with in a logging dispute in British Columbia. Anyway, he what happened is that Drew Coover was there, and he threw a smoke bomb, Logan Stats, at Tim Thielman, who is legally blind and is not able to, defend himself. So that was an outrageous thing to happen. And Drew sort of said, "What are you doing?" He kind of yelled out loud. And Logan Stats then came forward and smashed
Drew Coover's camera out of his hand, and that led Drew Coover to grab him and throw a punch at him and so on. But then at some point, I guess it was after that. So that happened. Then Logan Stats, Jim McMurtry, I'd given my billboards to Jim McMurtry because they wouldn't allow me to take them in the police car. And Jim was holding my billboards, and Logan Stats came and grabbed my billboards and smashed them. And then to describe it. It was just surreal what he was doing. And then, so the police were trying to get my boards back, and some protester said to the police, I could not believe this, "Where do you think you're going?" to the police officer. And then another protester said, "Don't come any closer," to the, so, and this is all covered in the footage. And I go, like, where else did the police get told not to come near, like not to try to retrieve property, not to do anything about this case? And I filed a report with the police. His name is Colwell, is the guy, the police officer, and he said, he basically told me that I deserve this to happen because, if you're going to go and, trespass on campus, don't be surprised when your property gets damaged. And I was telling him about the police, that they were afraid to do anything about it because of these protesters. And he said to me, "Oh, we've never heard anything about the police feeling nervous or anything." So it was almost like I was making up things or something.
So they're like, they're kind of gaslighting you a bit.
Yes, like I was really annoyed because, first of all, the whole setup, like in terms of my arrest, Uvic sent me an email telling me that I wouldn't be allowed to come on campus because I was doing an unsanctioned event. And I wasn't doing an event. Oh, and then they told me that the area that I wanted for my event was going to be used for another purpose. And that was a whole bunch of professors organizing a counter protest with hundreds of people
at the location that I said I was going to be meeting people to discuss these claims. So when I got this email, I thought, I'm not doing an event. I'm going there to discuss this claim, this and counter this misinformation that the University of Victoria has been perpetuating for 4.5 years, because they've been putting out all sorts of things saying that the remains of 215 children have been found. And so then when I showed up there, they gave me another notice which said that I was being removed because I was behaving in a manner contrary to their expectations. But they had printed this out before I had even arrived on campus. So they're making this up specifically to have me removed from campus because they don't want me to be able to counter the propaganda that they are, basically imposing upon everyone at that institution.
Hold on. Can we go back to that? You said you were behaving in a way that didn't meet their expectations.
That's correct.
What does that even mean? What do you like? Why? Because like, did they establish their expectations? Is it a moving set of expectations? Because I just feel like that's such an absurd. What's the word? That's such an absurd sort of like metric or thing to try to measure or to kind of dictate. Well, you didn't reach our expectations. Actually, we expected you to be taller, so we don't want you here. How does that even work?
Well, they did have some criteria that they specified, which were you have to respect the safety of others, for example.
There's that word again.
So, but the main thing is I hadn't yet even
engaged in any behavior, because they printed this off presumably an hour or two before I arrived. So like, it was a printed off document. So they decided in advance that I wouldn't be meeting whatever expectations that they had. And then we had this horrible meltdown with people acting in all these horrible ways, which were obviously not respecting the safety of others, and no one else got a trespass notice. So they're using these things to just remove people who have views that they disagree with. But that's basically what they're doing. And that's what the Justice Center is going to be pursuing with them, is the kind of unequal application of the rules that they've decided they're going to put in place for these kinds of circumstances.
I'm going to try testing. Oh, finally. Okay, you guys can hear me okay, right? Okay, good. I was just trying to switch the microphone. Thank goodness. Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it right there. It's a technique to try and shut up the people that they do not like, or whose opinions they do not like. And on that note, for those who don't know, I'm screening my documentary next week about the state of free speech in Canada. There's so many threads to pull on. One of them is academic freedom. It features yourself, Francis Widdowson. It features Jim McMurtry. You guys have something in common because we're defying the residential school narrative. You've been canceled in some way. It's not always direct. The thing that's interesting about this kind of this canceling stuff for the wrong opinions is like it's not always cut and dry in terms of like, they're not going to say, well, we're canceling you because we don't like your opinion. It's like, no. They find some other excuse. They use the excuse of safety or feelings. And it would be kind of nice actually to get a whole list of the different kind of excuses that they like to use. Because I feel like there's kind of like a Rolodex of them.
Yeah, I'm accumulating them as I go into these universities. Every university acts, first of all, they all talk to one another. So that's the other thing that seems to be apparent from, and I know they have an organization called Universities Canada, which is all the university presidents, discuss matters of concern to universities, administrators. I think the University of Victoria situation was immediately on the following what happened at Thompson Rivers. Because Thompson Rivers, they gave the trespass notice, and then they didn't do anything about it. And then now it's like, okay, well, if we don't do anything about it, then there's going to be these discussions take place, which, cause a lot of upset for people who are faced with views that they're not used to hearing. And we got to stop that, because we want to make sure that all of these, these groups, these people are belonging to these groups that they've designated as being sort of sacred objects. They shouldn't feel any discomfort or be upset in any way. That's kind of what's going on. And there's a really funny episode where a woman, I think her name is Angela, she's a young woman. They have this mic in the open area in front of the McPherson Library that's why it's an event, right? It's because you have a microphone and you have organization. That's an event, not just coming on campus to have a discussion. Anyway, they had this microphone in the middle of this area, and they'd stopped talking for some reason, and this young woman gets up and says, "Hi there, I'm a young person. I'm 23. How many people are this age?" And everyone's kind of listening to her, and then she says, "University, why are you here? Do you think that universities should be a place where you have a marketplace of ideas?" And you see the looks going back and forth between the organizers, and right away they move and basically take her away from the microphone. It was really quite amazing, because they let her talk, and then when she said something about the marketplace of ideas, they said, "Oh, no, we don't want that here at University of Victoria. We don't like that idea of, having a variety of different perspectives that we can look at." So that was another very telling kind of moment of this whole fiasco, which the University of Victoria, and I should mention, I have a master's degree from the University of Victoria in political science. I was at the University of Victoria for 5 years between 1987 and 1992. And although it always had a little bit of crazy around the edges, it operated as a great institution, at least in my experience. And you would never, ever be told not to discuss something in the program that I was in. In fact, you were encouraged to challenge your professors in the various courses that I took. And to see the institution that I graduated from in such an awful state is just really depressing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we try to make light of it and kind of laugh it off, because if you're not laughing, you're crying. It's depressing. And just to go back to your one point of, hey, she was talking about the marketplace of ideas and they took the mic from her. That is funny. Glad I don't live in that country. You know what I mean? If there's anything I've learned, and I don't want it to be true, but we've gotten into the territory where men and women don't exist, or it doesn't mean anything. Like we've eroded objective truth. And with that, it's there's no limit to where you could go. So, and I'm sure you could find examples in the past, but examples of, being a free speech activist, that is a dog whistle for being an extremist. Oh, that's a dog whistle for being a fascist. Oh, you want to champion free speech? We know what that means. The way in which they sort of can twist things around to try and make very inane stances and inane views to be extremism. That's why it's so important to push back against this stuff, because if we don't nip it in the bud now, it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. And, people may have different opinions on this, but and maybe I'm biased because I've been editing this documentary and a lot of it is featuring convoy people from the trucker convoy. But these people were standing up for bodily autonomy and they were called terrorists. Do we remember this? Or even people who were vaccinated and just wanted to stand up for the right to choose, they were called these horrible, vile terrorists. So I think that this person who got the mic ripped from them because they believe in the marketplace of ideas, I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think there's many left-wing people who would hear a phrase, marketplace of ideas, and be like, I heard Jordan Peterson say that, who is basically a Nazi. And then the hysteria and the emotions just start rolling and start going. And then they punch you in the face for saying something that upsets their worldview or what have you. I would like to get into a little bit more into the event and maybe kind of itemize some of the assault and abuse. But maybe just on that note, Widdowson, I don't know if you took a minor in psychology, but maybe would you like to maybe quickly delve into the sort of the psychology that's at play here when people seem to get whipped up into this frenzy where, maybe you could help simplify it for me or make it sound a little more not crude, but it's they are just get sort of caught up in their emotions and they get caught up in the ideas and the sort of I'm trying to articulate it here. But you know what I mean? Like, what do you think is at play here at somebody who, instead of listening to you, they're going to immediately start mocking you, deriding you, vilifying you, and kind of building up to, let's face it, committing violence against you or wanting to just kind of like punish you for having the wrong opinion. What do you think psychologically is going on in the minds of people here when this happens?
Well, I think first of all, they're encouraged to not be intellectual at the university. Like, I find that to be very distressing, because the universities really are supposed to be helping people to put their emotions aside and try to think things through and examine ideas which they might find highly objectionable. It doesn't mean you have to accept the ideas, obviously, but you should at least be able to know the nature of what these ideas are and the evidence that's being used to support those ideas. So you have the authority figures are not doing their jobs and encouraging students to be more objective and try to, kind of bookmark their emotions. But I think it's a highly moralistic kind of tone that is coming across, that you're dealing with, they believe that they're dealing with highly immoral kinds of acts or words that they have to counter. So if they don't try to shut down what's being said, it's kind of, they see it as a failing on their part. And so this is kind of how this is set up. And this statement that words are violence, this is the setup, is that because your words that are so upsetting, like that there is no evidence of the remains of 215 children being found, or there are only two sexes. That's the other one that gets everyone all upset that I'm familiar with. That because you say this, which is just so violent, because it denies the humanity of members of these groups, they are entitled to fight back with all sorts of actual physical violence of their own. And University of Winnipeg is where I'm still seeing this a lot. Like, people who haven't seen the 3.5 hours of coverage on my YouTube channel about what Daniel Page compiled this. He compiled the entire chronology of what happened. So these women, cry bullies, 7 of them, surrounded me and forcibly tried to remove me from campus. And to avoid that, because I couldn't get out of their circle, they encircled me. I just sat down on the ground and said that they were deranged, and I was just going to wait until they calmed down, and before that we proceeded with what I was going to do. These women, Vivian Ketchum, Grandma Shingus, and Louise Meno, continue to argue that they were entirely justified in what they were doing. And APTN is giving them oxygen and saying, oh, these women were faced with the hurt that Widdowson was causing them with her denialism and all this kind of stuff. So there's this encouragement for people who see themselves as part of an oppressed group to use violence to stop people from saying things which are upsetting to them. And that does even more of a disservice to them, because they, of all people, need to hear the truth. And, they might realize if they engage with people in conversation more, that maybe their ideas are somewhat flawed, and that maybe they should be orienting themselves to a more productive course of action than trying to, basically rip me to shreds if they were. I guess that's coming. Like I wasn't taking it very seriously at the time, but my cameraman, Daniel Page, feared for his life that day. That's how bad it was. He thought he was going to get stabbed by all these gangsters. So it was very serious, but I was just dealing with these ridiculous female cry bullies. So I didn't really take it as seriously as I should have taken it.
This was at Uvic, correct?
No, this was at University of Winnipeg.
Sorry. That's what I meant to say. Yeah, University of Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I actually got a chat. Someone in my chat just said my wife works at Uvic. She's struggling with her integrity at the moment. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's not easy, especially if you're working for one of these institutions. What if you speak out, your days are numbered. Like and this is what I found out myself. Like I lost my job, so I'm now on the outside pissing in. Instead of being in the inside of the tent pissing out, I'm outside pissing in. And I will piss on these people as much as I possibly can because they are an embarrassment. They are an absolute embarrassment for academic institutions. And, it's got to stop if we're going to have universities anymore. Like, it cannot go on. And maybe universities are lost. People keep on saying this to me, but I've got to fight as if I think they still can be saved, and then at the very least, I can document the destruction of them for future generations.
yeah, I think it's really important work. And although it seems hopeless or it seems very depressing, I think there's a big opportunity here. Because as I was saying, as absurd as the kind of transgenderism truths that they try to push, and a lot of normal people think it's totally absurd, trying to give sex changes to children and all that sort of thing. It has a lot of, institutional momentum and cachet to it. Like there seems to be a lot of like big players and big institutions. They say that Big Pharma likes to support this agenda because it helps give you lifetime customers who need to buy hormones for the rest of their life. But I think there's an opportunity with this residential school one because it doesn't have the same oomph. It only has the kind of just the Canadian institutions behind it. And it's also relatively new. It hasn't been grandfathered in like other sort of, I guess, agendas. And I guess the opportunity is to kind of expose it as this sort of clear political agenda, because it does touch a number of things like the sort of land ownership, which we've seen some sort of disputes happening in British Columbia over that. Turns out these land acknowledgements, we were actually casting a spell and giving away our property rights. I'm kidding, but maybe not. Francis, have you seen that sort of case in BC when it comes to land ownership? I don't know if I've ever heard your opinion on that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so it's directly related. The Kamloops case, which happened in May 2021, when it was declared that the remains of 215 children had been found. People before that date, because there was this kind of idea that Canada's a genocidal country. That idea was being floated. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission never used the word genocide. It used the word cultural genocide. And everyone at that time was saying, well, okay, we'll use those words because, cultural genocide is not genocide in like actual genocide. It's another kind of thing. And then when the Kamloops case came, they just took away the word cultural, and now everyone would accept that it was actual genocide. And then this claim that it was actual genocide was used to push through a whole bunch of different initiatives, like lots of legal cases started to unfold. And most importantly, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was pushed through the federal parliament in June of 2021. And of course, UNDRIP, as it's called, has massive property implications because it's not talking about treaties anymore. It's talking about traditional territories of Aboriginal groups, which is much larger than the treaty area, and things like there should be free, prior, and informed consent about any development that happens on any area of the traditional territory. So it's dramatically expanding Aboriginal control over land. And while this originally was just concerning Crown lands, which was bad enough, so publicly owned lands owned by the Crown, which is the highest authority either in British Columbia or in Canada, this is still bad because you have things like royalties for resources, which now Aboriginal groups are demanding access to. And what that does is that those royalties traditionally have gone into the kind of revenue base of the government, and they're used to provide services to citizens. That's now going to be diminished by Aboriginal groups raking off a portion of that. And if you think that what they rake off is going to go to help the marginalized Aboriginal people, you've got another thing coming, because that's not how tribal politics works. So there's all sorts of initiatives that are being justified by this Kamloops claim, and it's going to be an absolute disaster, especially in British Columbia, because they've made UNDRIP into provincial law, whereas no other province has done that. But still, it's a general softening up, making people feel guilty so that they don't resist the, siphoning off of billions of dollars for various nonsensical types of policies every year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would like to get some other people up there. So if you see people who were there at Uvic or who have actually experienced some of these situations on the ground, then definitely call them out, Francis. I was going to say with this issue, it is really sad. I'm not someone who's an expert on this topic, but just based on my sort of like intuition and seeing how politics works in Canada, the phrase I say is like the Indigenous in Canada or the First Nations or, this group is kind of like the original political football of Canada. Like they always got to get batted around and used by the political class to push their own agenda. And I feel like they almost never benefit as a group as a whole. It's only these sort of chieftains who have the names or who have like the certain rights or the certain benefits. Well, yeah, it's super sad because I see these certain people who get kind of spots on TV or who get featured, as part of the narrative to kind of push it. And they're being used. They're being used to push this agenda. It's not necessarily going to benefit them and their people, but, they're getting the attention. And CBC is listening to them. APTN is listening to them. But really, to what end? Like it's kind of, maybe this is kind of a cheap thing to mention, but it's like, do all the Indigenous reserves have clean drinking water yet? No, let's focus on bullying Frances Widdowson off of campus because she said some words that make us feel bad. Would you agree with that kind of like football analogy? Like they're like the original political football of Canadian politics, and they seem to love to be used by those in power, but do they as a whole ever benefit?
No, in fact, it's getting worse. Like the whole tribal politics type of developments that are occurring. That's essentially what's happening, is that there was, many decades ago in a sort of the position, the political position that, Aboriginal people should become Canadian citizens just like everyone else, and assistance should be given to those who were marginalized and struggling so that they could become equal citizens with everyone else. And then the chiefs in the late 1960s with the white paper didn't want that, because that was going to get rid of all the privileges that these chiefs got from having these special Aboriginal designations. So they fought hard against it. And because the government didn't really want to battle against the Aboriginal leadership, they basically sort of argued that, we would like to have Aboriginal leaders agree with whatever is going to be proposed. And then that emerged so that there was this now a new kind of way of seeing things, which was what Alan Cairns, who's a political scientist who I knew quite well, called parallelism, which is that this should be a nation-to-nation relationship between Aboriginal groups and Canadian society or the Canadian nation. And it was sort of seen like the relationship between Quebec and English Canada. But Quebec has millions of people, has institutions, has an economic base, is able to become a state if it chooses to become a state. And that's not the case with Aboriginal groups, which are small, unproductive, and not very well, they're organized. They're not very sophisticated in terms of their organization. So they don't have the institutions that would be able to run like a complex system. And so what happens is that you have this leadership is basically just using this to get more and more money diverted to itself instead of having the government provide the programs that are necessary in Aboriginal communities. And what that does is, because it is run according to tribal politics, is that all the powerful families just take that money and distribute it amongst their friends and relatives and leave the marginalized Aboriginal people without any power and ability to be represented within those systems. So I believe it's British Columbia, we've seen a decline in life expectancy by 5 years in British Columbia. So this is billions of dollars are going in to solve these problems. They're getting diverted to the Aboriginal industry, which is the lawyers and the consultants that work for Aboriginal groups, as well as the leadership. And then the marginalized members are getting more and more social problems, worse and worse living conditions. And now their life expectancy is 5 years lower than it was previously. So it is an absolute disaster. But because you can't criticize any of this, because you get accused of being a colonialist or a racist, etc., everyone just is very reluctant to start to argue that this is not a viable way to go forward. We can't keep on doing this forever. And those communities, those isolated Aboriginal communities, are not places which allow people to thrive. I had an interview with an Aboriginal person, an Aboriginal man. He's a very well-educated guy. He was trying to help the communities run their political systems in a more rational way, and they were so corrupt. He couldn't do that, and he was saying that it's just incredibly ugly. The living conditions, it's just this horrible places that exist, and what to do about it is a very complex kind of question. But recognize that it's not going to be beneficial to Aboriginal children to grow up in those isolated and socially dysfunctional areas with fetal alcohol syndrome rates of, who knows, between 25% and 40% of the population, something like that. Because if you're going to be miserable living in those communities, what are you going to do? Well, you're obviously going to try to escape, and the Aboriginal women in those communities, the escape is alcohol, and that, of course, results in fetal alcohol syndrome.
Oh boy, I'm looking through some of your Twitter, and just to kind of co-sign what you were saying, this is from June this year. Follow the money, $50 million for, quote, language programs. This initiative of the Aboriginal industry needs to be investigated and disrobed. This money should be spent on trying to solve Aboriginal dependency, most notably the fetal alcohol syndrome problem. I'm sure there's many such examples. And I'm also, I searched your Twitter for the word industry because I know you talk about the Aboriginal industry. And you wrote a book in 2007.
Yep.
How many chapters would be added to this book if you were to write it in 2025, and what would the chapters be called?
Well, certainly UNDRIP, the international dimension, the residential schools would be a major part. So Albert Howard and I actually, it was co-authored with Albert Howard, who I met in the Northwest Territories. We spent a few pages on the residential schools in 2008, and this, of course, is a much larger kind of area now. But the same structure is applicable, because we were looking at policy areas, things like education, things like healthcare, justice, self-government, land claims, all these things. So that's still, it just needs to be updated in terms of, and it's grown. The Aboriginal industry has grown in immense proportions. If you track the funding, the increases of funding, because that's how the government is trying to deal with this problem, is it just increases the money that goes into Aboriginal communities. And that, of course, makes things worse. It doesn't solve the problems. It gives more money to the leadership, which then uses the money that it has to oppress all the other members of the community and do ridiculous things like the language programs. Like, this is what people need to understand too. So Aboriginal languages are pre-literate languages. They're languages that had not yet developed writing, so they don't have the complexity to be able to function in a highly developed modern society. And what you have is a bunch of linguists who work for the Aboriginal industry who get money from government to develop these what's called orthographies, which are writing systems for these languages. And when you see all these words with like the upside down e's and all these symbols that you don't know how to pronounce, that's got nothing to do with Aboriginal people. It's got to do with a bunch of non-Aboriginal linguists who created this kind of phonetic, like it's called international. It's derived from the International Phonetic Alphabet, but they have other variations on it, which linguists use to have the actual sounds represented. But Aboriginal people can't read that script either. No one can read that. And that the government is spending millions of dollars every year and paying some non-Aboriginal people to develop these writing systems. It's just absurd. The whole thing is just ridiculous.
That is totally insane. I think you mentioned that to me before, but I forgot about it. I'm just going to read this tweet from June 2025. Aboriginal cultures in Canada were pre-literate. They had not yet developed writing systems. If governments decide to phonetize Aboriginal names on street signs, why isn't the Roman alphabet being used so that everyone, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, can read them? And the answer is because it's like the perfect woke thing where it's like, wow, look how culturally different and interesting and sort of a little bit irritating this is. Don't you like this irritating thing? Don't accept it? Don't you love it? But yeah, that is hilarious. That would be
it's one of the more bizarre of the initiatives, and someone like Sean Carlton, who I won't use the nickname that I used to have for him. He gets a T-shirt with all sorts of these words, this script on it, right? Because he's an ally and he's a white savior and he's going to help all these Aboriginal people. When what he's doing is just virtue signaling to everyone else, and taking money away from what's needed, which is, you need to have a very seriously well thought out educational program here for marginalized Aboriginal people. You need to have interventions to deal with the fetal alcohol syndrome problem. You need all these things. Like, what's Sean Carlton doing about that? It's ridiculous.
I mean, there is I don't know if it's like irony or if it's appropriate, but isn't it funny that the only people who can read these so-called Indigenous signs are like these privileged white liberals who major in anthropology or have a PhD in orthography. They're the only people who can actually read this stuff. And the actual Indigenous are like, huh, okay, is this for me? I want to talk about the documentary. If I'm not mistaken, you made a documentary and you're in the process of producing a second one.
That's correct.
I'm curious how much your Aboriginal industry book, Disrobing the Aboriginal Industry, does a lot of that come up in these documentaries?
Yes, it does. So Simon Hergott, who is a videographic genius, we produced he was a journalist for Global News for 10 years and got fired for his stance on I guess it was the trucker convoy. So, he's been terribly persecuted. And, but he's got incredible talent. And so we worked together on What Remains, which was a documentary about Pell River. So this directly had stuff to do with this language problem, like the orthographies and so on, because that's what they're trying to do in Pell River is change all the names and put them in the script that no one can read. And so the Aboriginal industry looms large in these kinds of initiatives. And then the current one that we're working on, which we've been working on, I guess, for the last 6 months or so, and all these universities are part of this documentary, what's going on, because we're talking about the massive institutional failure which has allowed this falsehood about the 215 remains to be perpetuated. So why is it that this has continued for 4.5 years? I understand why it happened originally, because people didn't understand GPR and they just thought that meant that bodies have been found. But we've known now for over 3 years that was just a big mistake. So then why do you have things like University of Victoria constantly perpetuating this falsehood, this kind of thing? So we're investigating all these institutions, the media, the universities, the RCMP, the police forces, and all the institutions that have been involved in doing this. So and for people, just to make a plug for our our work, we are fundraising for this document. If people want to see more work like the things that we're doing, that Simon is producing, there's a link to my fundraiser, our fundraiser, on my Twitter account. So because we really are reliant on the public to help us to be able to produce the things that we're doing. And I think if people watch What Remains, they'll see the high quality of work that Simon does with respect to the videography. Anyway, the Aboriginal industry, which is kind of behind one of the major explanations, which is, there's a lot of money to be made from a lot of different sources with respect to whatever type of Aboriginal policy initiative you're going to look at. And the unmarked graves claim is no different. So Kamloops Indian Band got $12.1 million to excavate in 2021. Where did that money go? It went to publicists and consultants. That's where that went. It didn't go to excavations, which it was supposed to go to. It went into the hands of 25 consultants. And so you see this whenever any initiative happens. There's all these professionals that are, drawing up various proposals and documents and so on to be able to lobby for more money. And so that's no different. And you'll see that with any kind of Aboriginal policy initiative.
Great. I just shared the link to the fundraiser there for uncovering the grave era at Kamloops. And I got a lot of sympathy for that. My documentary is also grassroots funded, not being funded by Russia, contrary to what some believe. But I saw Drew Coover join the Twitter space. So if you want to request to join, sir, I kind of do want to hear your story, because I think you got a nice camera smashed at Uvic, which, I mean, I would not be laughing. I would be pissed. Let's see here. Let's see if we can get you in here. But yeah, Drew Coover, if you want to request to join, would love to hear your story on on what happened to you down there. And I was going to suggest as well, Francis, maybe it's already in the works. Maybe, here's another idea for a documentary. There's no end to those in Canada, but doing an actual documentary on the disrobing the Aboriginal industry or Indigenous industry, and kind of just doing a deep dive on that. Or at least yeah. I was just going to say it's
Brody and 1BC, like they're looking at what they call the reconciliation industry, which is, like the industry that's a branch of the Aboriginal industry. So truth and reconciliation, the stuff that just came in 2016. But the next project, because of our entrance into universities, our next project is going to be looking at the breakdown of universities generally. Because I've been to around 8 universities and have been, kind of documenting what's happened in each one. And funnily, W. Brett Wilson offered to pay Uvic $100,000 to get if Uvic would apologize to me for how they treated me. And so I said, "Hey, Brett Wilson, why don't you give Simon Hergott and me the $100,000? They're never going to apologize, obviously. So why don't you give the $100,000 to Simon and me so we can do an expose, a massive expose on not only Uvic, but all the universities in British Columbia, which seem to be in serious trouble, which we're going to find out at UBC. We're going into UBC on January 22nd to see how UBC is going to react to having a discussion, not an event. It's not an event. We're going to go and and just see what students and faculty and staff think about this claim. What remains, like this question, what remains? And it's amusing because at UBC they have the UBC First House of Learning, First Nations House of Learning, which is headed by a woman by the name of Jolie Viveros, who is an amazing crybully, a crybully of all crybullies, who goes on these completely unhinged episodes on social media. And I really would like Jolie to come out and have some discussions with us. Get it off her chest. Tell us, everything that's on her mind so that we can investigate these questions with her.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in that. And I mean that as in we need to fund independent media in this country to tell the stories. We need to win hearts and minds. And, if you are an investor or you're someone who wants to kind of turn this country around, you need to find people who are going to tell the story, get that out there. It's, I just personally think when it comes to actually like shifting the culture, shifting perspectives, changing hearts and minds, it really comes down to a good documentary, a good, piece of video content. It's really one of the best things to actually, because just think about when it gets shared, like when a good video gets shared, it educates, it entertains. I think that's so critically important if we actually want to, get out of this insane sort of place we're at, where it feels like free speech is hanging by a thread. We need to fight back with storytelling, because when you think about it, that's kind of how we got into this situation. It was billions of dollars of propaganda pushing the different initiatives. And we need to start pushing back and here's the best part. The truth is on our side when it comes to what we're dealing with here.
Exactly.
But
exactly. And we got to fight back now. People, like, I was arrested at University of Victoria. Like, that was this, to be honest, it was a surprise. I didn't think they were going to do that, because I thought if they do that, I will, the gloves are seriously going to come off here. I will just be relentless in my criticism of them. Whereas Thompson Rivers, which, is a bit of a joke of an institution, it at least stood back and let us, discuss things. So it's like, hats off to you, Thompson Rivers. You're only in the Hall of Shame. You are not in the elite Hall of Shame, which Uvic has now ascended to, along with the University of Winnipeg, which, was just an absolute meltdown and embarrassment on all sorts of levels. So, we are not yet being disappeared. That's not happening, but that's not that far off. And people have to realize that, like, wake up and do something before it's all gone. And once it's gone, it's going to be, there's going to have to be a war to be able to get it back.
Yeah. Well, a war fought with words peacefully, of course. Ceases if you're listening.
No, it will not be. Once you have all your institutional mechanisms gone, there's no option. And that's what discussion prevents. Like, discussion allows people to work out their differences peacefully. And what's happening is, by shutting down the discussion, you're going to see increasing amounts of violence. That's what's going to happen. And it doesn't have to happen. The universities are behaving in an absolutely deplorable fashion. They could become involved and say, hey, we're intellectual spaces. These ideas might be controversial, but we're going to tell all these rabble-rousers, enough already. If you act in a way that's violent or tries to use the heckler's veto to shut people down and stop them from speaking, you will be expelled. You are violating the code of conduct, which is allowing people to have these discussions, but they never do that. They just enable and pander and coddle. That's all they do. And that makes things a lot worse. In all my episodes that I've been involved in before I got arrested, I took on the persona of Super Nanny, which is this character in the UK. Her name is Jo Frost. She's dealing with these toddlers having temper tantrums all the time. And what she does is she says, you never let the toddler get away with the temper tantrum. You just keep on carrying through with what you want to do. Be very patient. Keep on explaining what you're trying to do. And eventually the toddlers will get tired and they'll allow you to have the discussions. And that's what's happened every single time, even at the University of Winnipeg, which was an absolutely crazed environment. We just outlasted them and eventually did the Spectrum Street epistemology session after 3 hours of having abuse screamed in my face and having a can of pop dumped on my head, and Daniel being, fearing for his life and all these kinds of horrible things. But eventually everyone calmed down and we were able to have that discussion.
Yeah, just got to wait till they get all tuckered out.
Yes.
Get all their energy out. Give them a juice box. They're there. I got to ask, have you yet watched Making a Killing?
Me?
Yeah, have you watched?
Yeah, I was at the panel. I was on the panel. I was watching it. I was watching the premiere in Victoria.
Oh my gosh, silly me.
On December 1st. Yeah, I was on a panel with Dallas Brody, Tim Thielman, Drea Humphrey, and Jim McMurtry. We all talked about the documentary.
Nice. I haven't had time because I'm working on my own documentary at the moment. But tell me, what did you think?
It's excellent. It goes into a lot of very important detail about, the GPR, like not so much the GPR, sorry, but sort of all the details of the announcement that happened and the presentations. It talks to a number of Aboriginal people who are arguing that, the whole corrupt nature of governance. There's a number of important people who are interviewed about it. And it really provides a very comprehensive, background on what's happened with respect to the deception.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm really liking what 1BC is doing in terms of just disrupting the status quo. Like they're only a handful of members in the provincial parliament there, but they're making a lot of noise. They're doing all the things to disrupt the conversation. Like, hey, we're going to bring in Billboard Chris. Hey, we're going to screen this documentary in the actual government building.
Yeah, I was
amazed.
I thought that was going to get canceled for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, there's a 90% chance this is going to get canceled because I just couldn't see how they were going to allow that to happen with the clampdown that's going on. So that was amazing. They are, not acting like politicians who hold their finger up to the wind to find out which way the wind is blowing and then get on board with whatever that is. That's not leadership. Leadership is explaining what direction you think should be taken and trying to convince people as to why they should follow that direction. So it's really a breath of fresh air. To see this kind of political activity. I disagree politically with 1BC. I'm an old lefty, but that doesn't mean I can't agree with their courageous stance on, especially the Aboriginal policy direction and the Kamloops case, which the absolute cowardice, mendacity and cowardice. Mendacity is just constant lying that goes on. In the service of your own interests, and cowardice is just people who are afraid of what's going to happen if they say things. Those two problems in all of these institutions are really preventing us from, developing better ways to figure out what to do to solve all these serious problems that we're facing.
Yeah, and they say cowardice is contagious, but so is courage. And I want to go to Drew Coover in just a second here. But I think there's actually something that right-wing people can learn from you, because I talked to, I'm not going to say who, but at one point, I'll say it was someone who was part of the documentary, and I was talking about you, Francis, and they said, You know she's a socialist, right? but
George
hey-
Orwell was a socialist. No one should forget that. If you're a fan of George Orwell, which I'm a huge fan, he was a socialist. So, you know, we got the economic issues that we got to sort through, but free speech is the most important value of all the values, because it allows us to have the discussions to determine whether, you know, is capitalism the best kind of system, or is a socialist kind of system the better system. Like, those are the kinds of conversations that we need to have, but we're so distracted now in all the, you know, combating the totalitarianism and the, you know, the identity politics that's going on all over the place, which really doesn't have anything to do with the economic issues that people like George Orwell were concerned about.
Yeah, and I was gonna, commend you, because I've seen you speak before. I've seen how you get excited to go into these situations, to be like, you know what, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna cause a disruption because I know I'm right, and I don't care the consequences because I know I'm right, and I'm not gonna back down. And I'll look at like the Conservative Party, and it's like, you have more balls than the average conservative politician in this country. So, you know, I wish more right-wing people would take a page out of your book and just have that sort of, you know, lioness energy of just kind of, hey, this is what I believe, and let's see the consequences. I don't really care, though, because I'm going to stand my ground. Let's get Drew Coover up here. Can you unmute your microphone, sir?
Good dinner time, all.
Oh, sorry, you're eating.
No, I'm not eating. I'm preparing. I've been cooking for 2 hours. I'm making homemade venison sauce for my SpaghettiOs.
Amazing. Drew, I wanted to hear about your experience at Uvic, because sounds
which
like...
part? The
Well,
part
maybe...
where the part where the crazy lady the next morning was screaming, telling everyone that she's a crazy, fat, pregnant lady smoking crack that I videoed, or the time I was assaulted by a crazy Navajo Mohawk boy that's got no balls, or the awesome, unbelievable time when I had the opportunity to sit beside Billboard Chris and hang out with him for a couple of hours and watch a unbelievable, probably one of the best. I'm going to cry. One of the best documentaries that I've seen, and it was so inspiring. It was so, it was troubling for me because I think I know some things, but the movie, it definitely put a interest and lit a spark underneath my butt to make me dissect more things out there and not listen to so many different narratives, and try to find the people like Francis, try to hear voices like Jim, and try to stand beside people like Dallas, because these are the people that are unfortunately, and I say this unlightly, like unfortunately, are going to be the ones that have to take us to this place where we once were. Like, what's up? It doesn't make any sense. Like, they're amazing people, but we've gone so fucking ass backwards. You know, it's taking a little, how tall I was bugging Francis. She's like, I can stand and have my arm out 90 degrees, and she's underneath my arm. She's so short, but her spirit is so, when she speaks, like I've been told that I walk into rooms and I can control a lot of things, and I've had a lot of opportunities in my life, probably because of the way I speak and how I handle myself. But for such a small little lady to just come into a room and light it up with a vengeful, script of words, and they're not even angry words, the way she expresses herself. She's so strong. It's amazing. But yeah, the experience at Vic, I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
Let's just do like a real simple, leading into it, beginning, middle, end. Obviously something happened in the middle, and kind of the aftermath as well.
Yeah. So I didn't, I'll give you like a 5-minute blah, blah, blah. So I really, again, I going there, my head was still trembling from the information that I was sequestered to the night before, and just being with all those amazing people. So I was kind of hesitant, but I wanted to go. I wanted to be there, especially for Francis, because she doesn't have security, and I've done a lot of personal security work in my world and my life, and I had watched what happened to her in Winnipeg, and I knew because I had spoken to her, she didn't have she didn't have people like me around her. So I went there and I stood beside her, and I, listening to her speak to the police. They actually passed me first and went back to her, and I thought to myself, I'm going to have to interject, and I didn't. There was like 4 police around her, trying to express to her that she wasn't welcome. She's not allowed to have an event, and that she has to leave. And her response pretty much was a 3-part. There's no event. I'm just coming here to maybe talk to some kids about some things, and I'm not leaving. You can't make me leave. And when they expressed to her that, they didn't want her there, then the director of security, the lady, oh boy, she got some words coming out of my face towards her. Came and gave her a document. I've read the document with Francis now. Basically, it's a stupid letter. It doesn't mean anything. Even the day before, when she got an email saying she wasn't allowed there, or she wasn't welcome there. There wasn't a trespass letter. In order legally to trespass someone from your property, they have to show up to your property. They have to cause a disturbance, and then you can ask them to leave. If they don't leave, then you can call the police. So when we showed up and there was already 8 police there, they're all already in the wrong. So she handled herself with absolute grace. She's just like, arrest me. And they're like, well, we're just going to walk you off the property. And I actually yelled out, no, man, I think she wants to get arrested. Like, I seriously, I heard her say that. So I was just trying to, set her position through my voice too. And they walked her off, and they walked her, maybe it was about 2.5, 3 football fields to a parking lot. And they didn't turn her around to go back to the parking lot we came from, which was about 200 yards behind us. They actually walked us about 300 yards in the opposite direction.
Of course.
Then they pulled a cop car up. There was no cop cars. And when they put her in that car, I turned around and Tim was beside me, and Jim was, I think he grabbed her sign because she didn't take it into the car. I think that's when my head spun out of control, and I started getting extremely angry. I told the police officer, I said, you better fuck off, because I'm gonna throw one of you guys so far you don't even know how far I'm gonna throw you. I was so pissed off, and I had to collect my thoughts, and and then they pulled Francis away, and Tim was beside me about 10 feet to my right, and I backed up with him because I knew then it was getting hostile by then, because group.
Is this when the smoke bomb? Is this when the smoke bomb showed up?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we showed up, there was a big group of, APTN says there was 1,000 people. There was about 250 people. But they had came around the other side of the building to where we were walking to the parking lot. So as soon as Francis left, all of a sudden this mob of 200 people showed up. So I'm standing beside Tim, and I can see this dude standing there, and he had Landback. He had a jean jacket with all these, he wanted to be Hell's Angel biker dude, tough guy. He's just standing there in a big mask, The only thing you can see is his eyes. He's kind of Muslimed out as a dude. It looked pretty seriously funked. And I turned to look at Tim, and all of a sudden I can hear this clunk, clunk, and a bang, and it went right by my feet with Tim. And I looked back, and I could see his hand pulling back after you throw a baseball or something. It was pulling back, so I knew it was him. I immediately was like, okay, I'm going to take my tripod with my DJI Osmo Pocket 3 that's fucked, and I'm just going to point it at him. And I started walking towards him. I should probably, at the end of the day, I probably shouldn't have, but I honestly felt like I wanted to knock him out. He just came towards me, and I came towards him, and I'm like, oh shit, there's going to be a fucking standoff. And I was looking at him because he's about 2 or 3 inches shorter than me, but he had a couple of sweaters on underneath his wannabe tough guy Hell's Angels jacket. And he just reached out with his right hand, grabbed my camera off my tripod, and just whipped it about, 10, 15 feet, and it skipped across the ground. And that's when I lost my shit. I swung a right cross. Now, if you look in the video, and I've slowed it down quite a lot because I've got my lawyers on it now, I actually didn't make contact with the guy. I touched him, but I didn't like actually punch through. If anybody knows what boxing is, punch through. You don't punch the person, you punch behind him. I didn't hit him. And then I went to kick him, and I pulled back that too. And I'm just like, fuck this. There's too many cops. And the last time I was in court 23 years ago, the cop said, if you're in here again, you're gone for 2 years minus a day. That always hits me. I just grabbed the fucker, and I put a lock bar on his jacket so he couldn't, like, you grab it and you twist it one way and twist it back, and that way the jacket, the clothing becomes loose on the person and you have a better grip. When he realized he was in fucked, he started smashing at me. I yelled at the cop because there was cops over there. As soon as they turned, and as soon as I got eye contact with the redheaded cop, as soon as I looked at him and he looked at me, I just let go and backed off. This was the craziest part. Now, this was the craziest part of that whole week for me. This part right here. The cops separated him from me. They didn't have to separate me from him because I know what I'm doing. I just took one step back and stood my ground. But they had to take him and push him in between two cars. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to go over there after like 15 seconds. I'm going to go and see what's happening. So I walked over. I'm listening, and the police officer is standing there talking to him, and the supervisor, not the security director, but the supervisor for security was behind the cop. And you can hear it all. Please don't do that again. Don't throw that thing again. Don't throw those things again. And I'm like, are you going to arrest this guy? And the cop looked at me and shook his head. Then the security director, came towards me. He's walking towards me. Like, I'm going to punch this guy out. And I'm like, that guy just assaulted me. He threw smoke bombs at a blind guy, and you're not going to arrest him. And he just looked at me and shook his head like, no. And I'm just like, this is fucked. I'm going to get Tim, and I'm going to get out of here because so I'm going to level someone. So I walked back to Tim, and as I was walking back, you can hear this whoosh by my head. And he threw another smoke bomb. He fucking threw another one. So
does anybody know the legality of the smoke bomb? That's interesting.
Yeah, there's no rules. I mean, you can have them, but I don't think you can use them as it's almost like a terrorist. My lawyer said what he did was break some laws, but the reality is we're not going to go after him there. We're going to go after him for your camera and for your personal safety, and we're going to go after him so he won't be allowed to show up at any more events where you're at.
So how is the camera?
Oh, the camera's, it works. It works. It's made in China, right? It works, but it doesn't turn. It's broke. I got to get it. I ordered a new one yesterday morning because I need one for Friday.
So hold on. It works, but you're ordering a new one?
Yeah, but the camera works and it records, but it's a DJI Osmo, so you can basically hold it and touch the screen so it captures your head and put it on a tripod and walk around it completely in a 360, and it will follow your face. So that doesn't work anymore.
So that part broke.
Yeah, it's broke.
And those aren't cheap, are they?
It's just it's like $800, $860 tax in.
Dude, that's that's property damage to say the least.
It's the price to pay. It's the price to pay, and I don't have a lot of money. Some people may think I make money or I do things, but I do okay. But that's a lot of money to just throw out. But the reality is, I'll get the money back from him because I do own a couple of businesses. And I will put the cameras underneath one of the businesses. So when I do charge him and sue him for that property damage, and if the judge says yes, then I'll just put him on collections. I'll just pay for. I mean, it's probably going to cost me about $4,000 to get the $1,000 back. But I don't care. It's principle. I don't care.
Well, yeah, and thanks so much for sharing your story, Drew Coover. And I bring that up to emphasize that your property was damaged because, if the tables were turned, I could totally see the scenario of, oh my gosh, can you believe this? these far right fascists came in and smashed our camera. It's $800, and oh my God, like they caused property damage. It's in the sort
I'd
of
be in jail.
Well, right?
I would have been in jail. I would have been in jail, and I would have already been served with some sort of legal document from if it was the Aboriginal people. Like I would have probably had some document from some lawyer of some, we're going after you for action, because they've got lawyers behind lawyers behind lawyers.
Right. And Drew, you seem like a really passionate guy.
Facts.
You got to keep your cool in these situations. I know it's hard, but
bro, I'm a crisis and trauma intervention. I'm a negotiator, right?
Are you? Because telling your story, you're talking about beating somebody up every 5 seconds. You're like, I was about to beat the guy up. I was going to throw him 10 feet.
I'm actually licensed. Yeah, I'm licensed. I actually own a business. I teach police officers verbal judo. Verbal judo just basically means how to de-escalate hostile situations. So basically, you just let people But the reality is, I'll land the plane here or whatever. I have a sister that's she's 14 months younger than me, and she's got an IQ of 67. So I've always been the protector in the family. I got 6 brothers and sisters. I ran group homes for over 2 decades in the province of BC. I've always been that guy that helps people and takes care of people. But I've also played a little bit of professional football as rush end, so I don't take no shit. And when someone's going to harass or intimidate someone that's smaller than you, and they can't defend themselves, I will step in. And if it means I got to get charged or I got to get lawyers, that's whatever. When you throw a smoke bomb, when you throw a smoke bomb at a blind man Tim Tills, he has got 5 to 10% vision in one eye and he's completely blind in the other. I'm sorry, bro. I'm knocking you out. And I legally have a license. I can hold you, restrain you, handcuff you until the police come. I'm legally allowed to do that. I won't get in trouble. I do have the credentials.
Is that part of the verbal judo? I'm going to knock you out to de-escalate
No,
the
bro,
situation?
that's the Prince Georgian in me.
Ah, got it.
I grew up in Prince George, bro. I just don't take no shit, bro.
Well, hey, we appreciate you sharing your story, and that's total nonsense. I wanted to go back to Francis to compare this scenario with Drew to others, because it really is treacherous out there, guys. It sucks. I'll just bring up one example that always sticks out to me when it comes to this double standard. There was a protest. Billboard Chris was there. Was protesting transgenderism in schools. There was a march that was going to happen. Antifa blocked it. Fred Hahn was there, who is like the president or was the president of the teachers union. And, there's so many clips, or there's at least 2 clips of Antifa roughing up the protesters who are opposing or challenging the sort of gender ideology in schools, getting roughed up by Antifa. And then the right-wing people are getting thrown in the paddy wagon and not really following up at all with the violent Antifa members who are swiping and attacking the others. And in one case, it was Nick Alexander, Josh Alexander's brother, who has a bloody eye. He's coming out of this, after getting mobbed in this crowd of Antifa people, he has a bloody eye. He's the one getting, taken away in the paddy wagon. Of course, I don't think he's getting charged. But the point is it is very treacherous. It is lopsided. Justice is lopsided for people like us who oppose the state narrative. And I'm curious, Francis, if you have any other examples of that recently in Winnipeg where someone did not fight back, but did sort of get punished for simply trying to defend themselves or kind of just reacting to these situations.
In Winnipeg, we got trespass. So that was the weird thing about Winnipeg. So, Winnipeg, I had a faculty member who had actually suggested that I come to the University of Winnipeg. So, and I hadn't really intended to go to the University of Winnipeg because I was going to be doing the University of Manitoba for a couple of days. And I thought, I'll go to University of Winnipeg as well. Why not? I'll do the 2 universities. And his mother was sick or something, so he wasn't able to show up, or maybe he just felt that that wasn't going to be a good idea. So he wasn't there. But he read to me in the morning an email from the provost who had said that I would not be blocked from coming on campus and that security would protect everyone's safety, including my safety. That's what the provost had sent to all the faculty members. So I had this read out to me in the morning, so I knew that was the situation. And so when we got there, there's this woman, Melissa Robinson, who's telling me she works for the Assembly of Manitoba. She's telling me, you can't be here, you've got to leave, and so on. And I'm going, well, who are you? What authority do you have to be telling me this? It's like she wouldn't tell me who she was. So it's like, oh, forget that, I'm going in. So we walked in, and so the security, they kind of stood back and watched and were just hopeless and did nothing. And the police were called by 6 different people. The police never came. It was a really, really dangerous situation. And then about an hour into this, the security gave me a trespass notice for holding an unauthorized event. So I'm going, but I have authorization from the provost that I'm allowed to be here, and he denied it. He said, no, that's not true. And I'm going, it is true. I've heard this email.
Hold on. And so the provost gave you authority, and then the campus police said, no, you don't have authority.
Yeah, they said there's a trespass notice. So anyway, but then at the end of it, of all this mayhem, violence, everything that was going on, the security guy comes over and gives the 6 people who were supporting me trespass notices, barring them from campus for 5 years. And I'm going, you're serious? You're giving them like we just had these gangsters, roughing up Daniel Page to the point where he feared for his life and spitting on people and grabbing Michael Melanson by the neck. And those people, those gangsters, that was all fine. Everything that those gangsters did. So like that was a big mystery. And then of course, none of those people have been charged yet, despite all the footage. We have complete footage of all the violence and all the assaults that took place, and no one's been charged yet.
It's insane.
I know. Insane. And I like that one's really bad. Like Uvic with what happened with Drew, like this is now, it gets a bit, when everyone gets a bit hot under the collar, people do stuff and it's like, okay, who's it? It's a bit of a gray area. That's what they're going to be saying. Like the cop telling me that, no one's going to pursue my, Logan's stats for, smashing my billboards, because what do you expect? Here you are trespassing, and, if you're going to be in a protest, expect to get your property smashed, this kind of stuff. But with the Winnipeg situation, it was so one-sided. Like everyone who was supporting me kept their cool incredibly. Like no one escalated anything. Everyone just was very calm. And if anyone had lifted a hand at any time, there would have just been unbelievable violence, because there was, Michael Melanson, who's a tough guy. He's kind of like Drew. He's going to handle himself. He's been in a lot of, barroom spats and stuff. He said at one point he thought he was going to have to fight his way out of 40 people, because there was like all these gangsters and they were threatening him. They were seriously threatening him, but no one did anything about that at all. Like it was unbelievable. So I'm still sort of shaking my head about the absurd double standard that existed at the University of Winnipeg.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have violent gangsters who are welcomed back, and then the people who are just literally trying to have conversations.
Yep. The other thing too I should mention is these women, these horrible cry bullies. One of them, who calls herself Grandma Shingoose, she was, after she assaulted me, she's one of the 7, the sacred circle of 7 assailants, as I call them. She was invited by the police to give a talk at their sacred fire ceremony on Truth and Reconciliation Day.
Oh my gosh, I'm noticing a pattern.
And they're all like rubbing shoulders with the police, these assailants. Like, it's just absurd.
Right. This is a separate file but I saw this recently, and I feel like not enough people are talking about it. Independent journalist Mocha Bezirgan. He does a lot of reporting on the Sikh extremism and Khalistani stuff. And there was a Khalistani referendum in Ottawa, and he was interviewing. I don't know his name. I haven't memorized his name, but the interview gets interrupted by the police, who start to shake the hand of this Sikh guy. This Sikh guy went to jail for 7 years because he was, charged with terrorism. And there are the cops just like shaking their hands, like this is a guy connected to the, the Air India bombing, or at least like that was partially the reason of why he was put in jail for 7 years. But there are the Ottawa police just shaking this guy's hand, like, hey, can't wait to, hey, love to see you. And it's just kind of like, what's going on here? This guy, this guy went to jail for terrorism at the time. But hey, he's got a turban on, so he's part of the state ideology narrative of always being accepting to every foreign group. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here.
But part of that is, and that was what was happening in Winnipeg, is that the police are really afraid to enforce the law because these gangsters, like they don't want to upset the gangsters because they'll know they're going to have to, so they kind of tried to stay out of it. And I'm sure they justified their actions by saying, that we were saying hurtful things. What do you expect? You say hurtful things to these gangsters, and you're going to get them riled up, and they're just don't say the hurtful things.
And that's really it in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't say the hurtful things. And
hey, Greg, I've got on video. I've done a lot of the Palestinian stuff every Saturday in Vancouver for about 11 months. And I also interviewed the brother of the guy that was murdered in Surrey, the Sikh guy, a part of all the Khalistani thing. I have video footage of police officers, they didn't know I had my camera on, telling me that they're there to protect the people that are campaigning or protesting. And they're there to protect them from people that are not sending that narrative out of Canadian values. I actually got like 4 of it.
I mean, who knows what the actual pep talk is from the police chief? I would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. Listen, guys, it's really bad.
I'll get there.
It's really bad public relations if you don't side with the Palestinian people. Okay, so if they're kind of violent or acting rowdy, just kind of turn a blind eye. You don't want to be in the CBC. Everyone's afraid, right? Afraid of hurting the feelings. I did share the video of you. Oh my gosh, getting pop poured on you. This is, man, what a scene. What a scene.
I know. That was just that was great because the Aboriginal People's Television Network, they're trying to do this takedown of me as this hurtful person. And they showed the best footage of this. Like I hadn't seen any of those shots before because I had my Daniel had been pushed off campus. My videographer, Daniel Page, had been pushed. So he couldn't film anything that was going on. And then I just had my smartphone on my chest, filming from my perspective. So I had no kind of bird's eye view of everything that was going on. And this APTN guy, Chris Reed, whoever his cameraman was, they took all that footage. And that was the first time I seen the swarming that happened with these 7 women and then them pouring pop all over my head when I was sitting there. Like just unbelievable stuff. That and the most maddening thing is, they're told by all their allies that, oh, you poor thing, you were, they see that they've done nothing wrong. Like it's just like they're opposing a denialist, and they did the right thing, and they're activists. They're fighting for whatever they think they're fighting for, which I don't even, they say it's truth. They're fighting for truth.
Hey, and Greg, if I can say one last thing before I take off here. Listen, friends, I posted on December 8th a video. These people actually parade with cameras at these protests. And I actually have Logan's stats here, the guy that assaulted me, the guy that threw bombs at Thielman, going after an RCMP at the Ferry Creek blockade with a tomahawk. He actually went after a cop. He actually hit a cop with a tomahawk. It's all there. It's all evidence. It's
Wow.
on the video. It's
And
right there. I just DM'd you.
And he got away scot-free, I'm guessing.
He's been charged a lot from. I've seen his I've seen his thingamajigger. I told my lawyer. I said pull up his sheet. He's been charged a lot, but no convictions.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's wild. I did actually see that. I was scrolling through your Twitter and saw the guy, the tomahawk and the screenshots. So thank you for sharing.
It's just
that.
insane. That's what I mean. People, like, if you're listening, when you go around these protests and stuff, just be diligent, right? Be careful what you say, how you react. Just make sure you've got your camera and, things are recorded, because all of this stuff, it's going to come to fruition. We are going to turn the curve, as Francis says. The world will get better, but unfortunately, it's probably going to get a little bit more worse. God bless.
Well said. Thank you, Drew. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start to wrap it up quickly. I do have a couple more questions for you, Francis, but that is good advice. In these situations, your camera is your best defense. So make sure it's recording and you do it to protect yourself. It's because it might be evidence in the future, and it's important. Or also just kind of documenting the insanity of what we're dealing with. I wanted to ask two questions. First, you have been getting some coverage in APTN, and what is the most absurd thing that you've seen, surprising thing? Because, I'm sure you've seen how this channel, how this platform operates. Is it like, did they reach new lows, new absurdities? Is it about the same? Or, tell us of what your reaction is to this. I'm sure you're really well aware of this organization, having been into Indigenous issues for years. So.
Yeah. Well, the violence at the University of Winnipeg, because Michael Melanson, who's part of my research group, really thoughtful guy and is aware of the terrible kind of gang problem in Winnipeg. And he was telling me, this is going to be you don't know what you're doing here. And I'm going, it'll be a bit tense, but, I was at Regina. I went into the University of Regina, and they told me about the gangs in Regina, and there was no problem. It was all very theatrical. And it was a whole nother level. It was very, it was not theatrical at all in Winnipeg. It was, it could have got really, really violent. And the police didn't come. That was the other surprising thing, which we're still trying to get disclosure from the university and the police. And the big question is, did the University of Winnipeg call the police? And the University of Winnipeg claims that it did, but I find that very hard to believe, that the police would not come when the University of Winnipeg called them. So, and the president of the University of Winnipeg just got fired about a month ago. So I don't know if it had anything to do with the meltdown that happened at the University of Winnipeg and so on. So the University of Winnipeg, I'm still kind of shaken, actually, to be honest, looking at all the footage and going, and of course, poor Daniel Page, who's the nicest guy, completely wouldn't hurt a fly. And he got really badly manhandled in this situation. So that still makes me really angry, thinking about what he went through on that day, which was just terrible.
Yeah, and, I don't want to be boohoo victim, but, this stuff is pretty traumatizing. And I'm sure, or at least, not to get too personal or into this, but I still have, when I ran for the People's Party in 2019, it was very not popular. I had the entire Communist Party protesting me at debates. I had, volunteers have stuff thrown at them and all sorts of stuff. And it was only until months after the election campaign, because I was campaign, go, go, go. It was only until months after that I was man, that really messed me up. That actually, that was actually really rattled me at the time. I just didn't have the time to really process it, of how kind of wild it was. Because there is something, and I'd like to get your kind of, I don't know, your perspective on this, but there is something that really messes up your nervous system, let's say, when a total stranger, you don't know them, they hear the wrong thing about your opinion or political views, and they are like just physically, viscerally hostile towards you immediately, like you are a dangerous enemy to them. You know, it's quite the experience. Like when a stranger is like, "Oh, you have these views, like you're my enemy," and it's like it's a very uncomfortable. It's very wild. How would you describe this phenomena?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've done it for so long that it's not
It's
like
no
less
big deal, Greg. It's just water off a duck's back. I'm used to
Well,
these
it,
people.
on the one hand, it's sort of like that. But on the other, it's kind of, you can sort of like, you almost have a whine, a high pitched whine in your head all the time. Like it starts to become really hard to concentrate on other things, you know, like you feel your whole life beginning to be swept up in this kind of battle where you can't really focus on anything else. You sort of have this high pitched kind of energy all the time, thinking about things, wondering what's going on. Like you lay in bed at night, like with your whole, all these images and everything. And you probably notice this yourself too, because of course I was an academic for decades where I spent all my time, you know, reading books and writing and so on. And now I'm dealing with the video stuff all the time, with the footage and the clipping things and doing editing and stuff. So it fills your brain with images all the time. So it's kind of got this very weird kind of altered state, I guess, almost. So I'm kind of a bit disturbed, to be honest, about my, you know, the changes that I see happening in the way I'm kind of living in the world, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, I really would like to at some point get back to writing my books and things like that, right? Like this would be good to do, but I just could not do that right now. Like I just don't have enough, you know, sort of quiet time in my head to sort of think about things very much. Like everything is just kind of got this very immediate, highly visually charged kind of way that's sort of taking over most of the way I'm kind of experiencing things. So I find this a little bit disconcerting.
Part of that, Francis, is being addicted to social media. You're doom scrolling. You got to stop doom scrolling.
Yeah, no, that's probably it too.
I'm kidding, but there, you know, there is some truth to that.
Yes.
But yeah, no, to speak to that, it's, for me, when I first started to, you know, I was a little interested in politics. I thought, okay, maybe I could try to, you know, promote these ideas and be a candidate. But seeing the effect of propaganda on people, like up close and personal, you know, and I'm a younger kind of guy, or at least I used to be. And I thought, man, like this is an existential problem. Like what if this gets worse and worse? And I mean that as in just kind of like the hysteria of people who will have these ideas in their head thinking I'm evil. And I'm really confident that that's not the case, but it's a very popular thing. Like, you know, like a whole room, hundreds of people think I'm a demon. And it's like, how am I going to go back to my day job and like not be concerned about this? You know, this is what's our country going to look like if this continues? And of course, sometimes when you're armed with the information and the facts, you know, to the Kamloops example, you know you're right, or at least that you have a good point, but it's like, it's almost like it's so lonely, and you're like, you know, it's like I'm here knowing that this is correct, but it seems like the whole world disagrees with me, and the whole world's gone mad. But I did want to ask one more kind of positive question at the end, and then I think we might wrap it up there. But they say you got to force a tyrant to act like one. And the sort of colloquial term they use on the right wing is getting red-pilled. But red-pilled would be like kind of a summary of, you see some harsh truths about the world are revealed to you. For example, some people might trust the mainstream media completely with everything that they say. But then maybe they were at this event, or they saw this event, or they know someone involved in the event, and they're like, wow, like the mainstream story totally didn't match up to what I saw. And I think this is a positive for when you do things like this. Slowly but surely, Francis, when you do these demonstrations, there'll be one student, maybe a handful of students, maybe a few people online, whatever, but they will get red pilled in some sense and be like, wow, like this is a problem. Have you noticed anything like positive stories like that recently, where there's been an academic who reached out to you privately and was like, wow, like keep on doing what you're doing, because, things need to change around here?
Yeah, I actually, I feel like I have a lot of support, even at Mount Royal University. I have 10 very strong colleagues who have supported me, since since I was fired. So I didn't really have the same experience as a lot of people do when you're kind of ostracized and, kicked off the island kind of thing. But one thing I think is my approach, which I really am not trying to win the arguments that I'm having with people. And I just want to try to understand more why they believe the things that they do. And I am going to keep calm under any kind of conditions of people screaming at me and doing these kinds of things, which I don't think a lot of people can do. Like I kind of am noticing that, like even someone who I really like a lot, someone like Jim McMurtry. I don't know sure if Jim's on the call or not. But Jim gets kind of excited. And I'm going, and it's not a bad thing, because like when I was at Thompson Rivers, we all had our different styles, and Jim was really engaging with people. He was kind of doing the street preacher kind of approach, and everyone was like kind of, really engaged and so on. But I was kind of watching this going, oh my God, like this is way too excited, at a high level of excitement here, which is going to get everyone all kind of riled up. And so I think when people watch what I'm doing, especially with the street epistemology, I don't see how anyone can watch that and think I'm doing something inappropriate, like, except for if they just think an Aboriginal person should never be argued with ever, or something like that. Like I really don't, like that kind of attitude, which you're never gonna get anywhere with that sort of position. But I don't think I've really done a lot of, with my videos. My sense of humor gets me in trouble sometimes, because I just cannot take all the cry bullying, like all these cry bullies. They're doing all these horrible things, and then they're, oh poor me, and it's I just I kind of make fun of them and stuff a lot of the time, and then everyone tells me I'm unprofessional, and I don't seem very professorial. But it's like, you need to have a bit of a sense of humor, otherwise it's just going to be really depressing. But I think that's what's doing it, is people who watch me in these crowds and dealing with all these cry bullies. I think that they got to realize that I'm not, I don't really have any ill intent with what I'm doing. Like, I don't see why people, I understand they've got a preconceived notion that I'm this kind of monster. But it was kind of funny in Winnipeg, because this woman saying, what did she say? She said, "You're a bully and a monster," after I've been surrounded and screamed at and had just abuse like hurled at me for an hour, when I'm trying to calmly discuss, whether there's the remains of 215 children. So, that's the unusual kind of type. I think that most people, when they're watching it, they're going to go, wow, things are a little bit unhinged here. And, I think, and I'm seeing that a lot of people are saying that, I get nasty messages too, but I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. Like, people calling people names, it's better than getting violent. Like people shouldn't be wanting to tone police people all the time and wanting them to be like, it's better that if someone's angry and wants to scream at people, well, they scream at people, and it doesn't hurt me. Like, learn to deal with people just being mad. There's no big deal. Like, that's kind of my attitude. So I think that people watching what's going on, this is having an effect. And to be honest, in the last few months, things have changed a lot. like I sense people are paying attention now, much more than they were, 4 or 5 months ago. So it's all good. I'm feeling, although I wouldn't say optimistic, I'm feeling relatively, with the exception of just being like kind of constantly preoccupied with all these things that are happening. I think that there's a lot more. There seems to be an opening for more discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. And absolutely. I mean, I remember when you were, I recorded an interview with you almost around a year ago, and recorded your lecture at Brock about the residential schools, the grave error. And I was telling people about you. I'm like, oh, Frances, she's outspoken on the residential school thing. And people are like, yeah, whatever. Okay, Frances. Okay, I don't know her. But now it's like everyone wants to talk to Frances. She's causing these big storms, these riots of orange shirts on university campuses everywhere. And like you said, it's getting a lot of attention. It's getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And when people are, oh, it's hopeless here. There's so much control about speech and da-da-da-da. It's hopeless. It's going to be ugly to solve this problem because it's going to be upsetting people. That's part of the solution.
Yeah.
Like there's no getting through this without upsetting people and getting called names.
Yeah. And it's not a bit like sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Like that's the mentality. Like whatever I say to people, you can call me whatever you want. It doesn't bother me. Go ahead. Get it off your system. Maybe you'll be a more relaxed person this evening when you're dealing with your kids after you've yelled and screamed and told me how much you hate me. And I don't care whether you hate me or not, because I'm not doing anything to make you hate me. You're hating me because of something else that's going on in your head, and I have no responsibility for that. The other thing, it's just, if I could just say something that's helped me a lot in thinking these things through, is people really want to see a result of things too much. You have to focus on the process. Keep on just plugging along, right? Just you're confident in what you're doing. You're saying the things that you think should be said. It might not have an effect today or next week or next year, but it's doing that that's important. You should take pride in the fact that you're just doing that, and don't expect any payback for it. Because if you want to get some kind of result, you'll get frustrated, like that's kind of, and if you can just kind of take, feel that you've done some things just by, engaging in this conversation where you just ask some people some questions and you had an interesting discussion. Like I was on a call a couple nights ago with Todd McDougall, Winnipeg Independent Media. Anyway, he had 5 Aboriginal people on the call with Jim McMurtry and me, which
Nice.
was unprecedented. Like,
Nice.
and it was
How'd it go?
It was a triumph by happening. Like that's what I'm telling people. But I had people watching it who were saying to me, "I just could not watch that. That just drove me crazy." And it's like, well, Rome wasn't built in a day. And the best thing was that we had these Aboriginal people who agreed to come on this program and tell us what they thought. And we were able to understand what they were going through more. I didn't agree with them. And I did find the interaction was not at a particularly high quality level, but still it was a great thing that happened. Take confidence and get some kind of feedback just in doing things, and don't expect something to have this massive change, because it's not. It's gonna be a lot of slogging in order to get things done, get any kind of improvement happening.
I think that's super wise. I think that applies to a lot of things in life. You're not going to get results right away. Anything worthwhile is going to take a lot of work, and you're not going to get any praise for it or any results for it for a long time. And I can hear you with that attitude, because you're just focused on the next university event, the next campus event, what's the next billboard going to be? What's the next street epistemology? What is it again?
Yep.
Yeah. Street epistemology. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Francis, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And speaking of doing the hard work, I'm actually going to see you next week for
Yeah.
the screening of my documentary, The Hate Network.
Yep.
Tickets are still available for the screening. You can go to you can go to freespeechcalgary.eventbrite.com, or you can go to SaveFreeSpeech.ca and scroll down to the Calgary event and buy some tickets. You'll be there on the panel.
Yes.
John Carpe will be on the panel.
Yep.
Archer Pawlowski will be on the panel, and also Jojo Ruba will be on the panel, and they all have similar experiences in terms of mobs of people just hating them. Maybe not John Carpe. He's more of he's more of just from the JCCF. He does his best to not piss people off and do a good job of being a lawyer. And yeah, but that should be a very good time. Hope to see people out there. I do have some more energy. Maybe I could bring up Kathy Drake. Was Kathy on the ground for any of these events?
She was kind of a witness to some things. She's been involved with the Thompson Rivers stuff. She was in the first street epistemology in Thompson Rivers.
Okay, cool. Kathy, if you're around and want to hop on, then definitely grab a microphone, unmute yourself, say hello, maybe share some of your thoughts on what we've been talking about. I think I invited you up. Kathy, testing 1, 2, 3.
Hello. Sorry, I was trying to teach my son. I was having a debate with him about how sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And these Zoomers think that some sort of placebo effect can physically harm you if you believe the words are going to harm you. And I was trying to explain that that's not on the responsibility of the person saying the words. I don't know how the idea that words are violent are infecting people. I don't understand how this is actually like an argument that you should be able to police people's words. That you shouldn't be allowed to say slurs, that hate speech is real, all these sorts of things.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think just to jump off that, I think for young people too, like they grow up more online and more of their actual reality is online. So instead of being outside in the world, talking to people, seeing their face, hearing their voice, seeing the kind of complexities of the depth they are as a human being, when you're online, it's like the block of text. What does this text mean? This means something. So there's so much gravity to these words. It must mean something about who I am and affects my feelings. But I'm just kind of spitballing there. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. So I'm really grateful for Frances Widdowson's influence on myself and everyone else. I learned so much from her every time I listened to her. I learned more in this space. And I'm looking forward to going to the University of Lethbridge with her.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm nervous, Francis. I feel like we need to actually break that down and come up with a plan. Maybe I'm traumatized. I got to toughen up. But that's the first time I met Francis. And last time we were there was an angry mob and they were drumming and one woman was dancing and kicking in the direction of Francis, forcing Francis to move back. It was like a veiled physical threat in a way. It was like had this plausible deniability to it. And at one point in time, the police and the security guards had made a line, like a Red Rover line. And they had Francis go through there, her husband, and then they pointed to me and pointed over his shoulder. The one police officer had me go through the line and a couple other people. And I remember we were taken into these underground tunnels.